Welcome to Scrum Masters Elite _UK. In this video, I share my personal perspective on Scott Robertson's departure from the All Blacks, when results alone were not enough to sustain trust. If you're interested in the stories behind power and culture in rugby, please subscribe to the channel. From my personal point of view, I reflect on Scott Robertson leaving the position of All Blacks head coach, when results were not enough to protect the trust needed for him to stay. Scott Robertson being forced to step down as head coach of the All Blacks is not merely a sporting event, but a complex story about power, organizational culture, trust, and how one of the world's leading sporting nations confronts its own internal crisis. When information surrounding the fateful meeting emerged, my initial reaction was not exactly surprise, but rather a heavy, uneasy feeling mixed with confusion. Is performance alone really not enough in an elite environment like New Zealand Rugby? Or, more deeply, are trust and culture the true line between survival and dismissal for a head coach? Scott Robertson arrived at the All Blacks amid enormous expectations. He was not only a successful coach, but also a symbol of innovation, energy, and a winning mentality forged with the Crusaders. His appointment as Ian Foster's successor was widely seen as inevitable, even as a return to the right trajectory for the All Blacks after years of instability. That is why, when news of his dismissal broke, despite a 74% win rate, a figure many coaches could only dream of, I couldn't help but ask, what really happened behind closed doors?
Details revealed in a report by the Irish Independent paint a deeply troubling picture. A meeting in which the head coach was asked to bring an employment lawyer, yet was not informed in advance of the specific feedback or allegations coming from the players. A tense, cold atmosphere where Robertson quickly realized that the decision had already been made. To me, this is not just about how one individual was dismissed, but about transparency and respect, values long considered fundamental to New Zealand rugby. If events unfolded as described, then Robertson's dismissal appears to have been predetermined. The meeting was no longer a genuine dialogue, but merely a final formality to legitimize a decision already taken. This leaves me deeply uneasy, because when a major organization like NZR operates in this manner, it not only harms a coach, but also erodes public trust in its leadership system. That said, in fairness, it cannot be denied that Scott Robertson's tenure with the All Blacks was not as rosy as many had hoped. The departures of assistant coaches Leon MacDonald and Jason Holland pointed to clear fractures within the coaching group. Results on the field, while positive overall, contained worrying signs beneath the surface. Historic defeats to the Springboks, Los Pumas, and England were not just ordinary losses, but direct blows to the pride of the All Blacks, a team accustomed to an aura of near invincibility. The 43-10 loss to South Africa in Wellington, in particular, still haunts me. Not only because of the margin, but because of the manner of defeat. The All Blacks were comprehensively dominated, directionless, and devoid of identity. That was the moment when I, like many fans, first seriously questioned whether Robertson truly had control of this team, or whether he was being swallowed by the enormous shadow of the All Blacks themselves. Similarly, the first ever loss in Argentina to Los Pumas marked another painful milestone. It showed that under Robertson, the All Blacks were no longer a team that wasn't allowed to lose against supposedly lesser opponents. Then came the 33-19 defeat to England, ending the Grand Slam dream and reinforcing the idea that the problem lay not in a single match, but in the broader process. Still, what troubles me most is not that Robertson was dismissed, but how he was dismissed. In elite sport, coaching changes are normal. But when the reasons revolve around vague concerns about trust and culture, without being clearly articulated or honestly discussed with the person involved, the decision becomes murky and unconvincing. NZR chairman David Kirk has denied that players played a decisive role in Robertson's departure. Yet that very denial only fuels further suspicion. If not the players, then who? The board? Certain interest groups? Or simply fear that the All Blacks are losing their number one status? When these questions remain unanswered, public trust is inevitably damaged. From a personal perspective, I feel sympathy for Scott Robertson. He was not a perfect coach, but he deserved fairer treatment. At the very least, he deserved to know where he went wrong, whose trust he had lost, and to have the opportunity to explain or correct those issues. Being forced out in such an opaque context is not only a professional shock, but also a deep psychological wound. At the same time, I feel concerned about the future of the All Blacks. Pressure is now firmly on David Kirk and the NZR leadership. The decision to dismiss Robertson has been made, and there is no turning back. His successor will face enormous expectations, while fan trust has already been shaken. If the next appointment proves to be the wrong one, a fierce public backlash is entirely possible. Ultimately, Scott Robertson's story highlights a broader truth. In modern sport, winning is no longer the sole measure of success. Culture, trust, communication, and transparency play an increasingly vital role. But if these values are used merely as vague justifications to remove an individual, rather than being genuinely practiced in a fair and consistent manner, then it is the organization itself that must take a hard look in the mirror. Scott Robertson may have failed in certain aspects, but the manner of his departure says far more about the current internal state of New Zealand rugby. And as someone who has followed this story closely, I don't just regret the loss of a coach. I worry about an icon, the All Blacks, standing at an uncertain crossroads between a glorious tradition and the unpredictable changes of a new era. Thank you for following Scrum Masters Elite_UK. The story of Scott Robertson shows that at the All Blacks, performance is sometimes still not enough if trust and culture have already fractured. If you're interested in the hidden sides of elite rugby, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.